Hey, it's the nerdy sports fan. So, the draft is over. Draft grades have been given out. I felt like doing a quick top 5 draft winners because a lot of people got A's and some delineation is in order here. So, my 5th favorite draft had to be from the Arizona Cardinals. So, one, you can't separate the draft from the trade. You lose a second round pick, but you gain DeAndre Hopkins. So there's a minor factor of that in this grade. Beyond that, though, with their first round pick, they get a generational talent. And I love it when teams go for talent in the first round. First of all, almost every player is a crapshoot. So the more likely somebody is to be successful, that's what gets players up into the first round. So desperately try not to draft for need, especially at the top of the draft, unless you move along the draft board by trading up and trading down to make your need fit the grade. That's the only time where it's acceptable. But what they did was Isaiah Simmons falls to them. They snap him up. And you would have loved to see a left tackle at that position because there were talented ones still available, sure. But in waiting to the third round, they still ended up filling that left tackle need with Josh Jones. Now, Josh Jones, a lot of people had going late in the first round. 2 different tackles end up going late in the first round that I didn't have as high a grade on as I had on Josh Jones. So I don't know what the heck these guys are hearing in interviews or seeing on old medical records, things that we don't have access to that made him fall so far, but purely on the tape. Josh Jones is the prototype for what a left tackle prospect is going to be in the NFL. He's extremely athletic. He's big. Those are the same qualifying factors that got Mekhi Becton into the first round, because neither one of them are extremely polished blockers. Technique-wise, they do need some work specifically in pass protection. I don't understand why that ended up being, not a big deal for Mekhi Becton, but other players that have the exact same thing that you can say about them fall so far down the board. I get it. Becton's 6'7", 300 some odd pounds, and runs a 5-second 40 time. A lot of other tackles are within 2 inches of height, within 10 pounds of weight, and maybe add a tenth of a second to their 40 time. And Jones falls into that category for me. So kudos. And in the 4th round, they addressed a couple of guys that can be, at the very least, rotational players on the defensive front to fix the glaring need for run defense on this team. So they addressed needs, but they did not do it in a way that ignored what the premium talent was available at the positions that they were drafting at. So kudos to the Cardinals. My fourth favorite team in the draft was the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions did very good, again, amassing talent that also happened to fit needs. I do have questions about drafting the running back DeAndre Swift as early as they did, for one, above other running backs, too, and really just that Kerryon Johnson is a running back that's extremely effective in the passing game, and he's a solid running back. He's an all-rounder. And DeAndre Swift is not an all-rounder. He really only is exceptional as a pass catcher. And that's half of what you already have in Kerryon Johnson. So this draft pick makes sense to me if and only if they're planning on either phasing out or trading away or cutting Kerryon Johnson. So it remains to be seen they could potentially get a higher grade if they did end up planning on doing something with Kerryon Johnson, and that comes through after the draft here. But for now, that's not exactly a high value selection in my mind. I did, however, absolutely love drafting Jeff Okudah. That was a no-brainer to me. He's a lockdown corner. They are few and far between. You need to snap them up when you can get them. And if it's obvious, it doesn't matter. It's still the right choice. So I liked that. I love Julian Okwara. Julian Okwara is one of the many people in later rounds that were in later rounds because of either a combination of injury history or off the field problems, and truly have first round talent. So I love the addition of Julian Okwara to this defensive front. You can always use more pass rush, and Okwara is instant pass rush. So I love that selection. They also addressed the interior of their offensive line, which is a glaring need for this team. But again, they addressed it at a point where it makes sense for the available talent level in the draft. They were able to get what's likely to be day one starters in both Jonah Jackson and Logan Sternberg. And word through the grapevine is a number of teams were trying to trade up to get Sternberg ahead of the Lions, and it just didn't work out for them. But these guys are going to shore up the center of the offensive line and specifically fix a need that extends the life of your quarterback. You know, Matt Stafford's no spring chicken. He's not moving as well as he did in the past, and he was never really a mobile guy in the first place. So you need to make sure to dumb down the rush up the middle. So you need a solid interior of the offensive line in order to create that pocket that he needs, and this addresses that to make what's really your strongest position on your team even stronger by giving him just a little bit more time. So great job for the front office of the Lions. And again, there's still more to come during the offseason, including cuts and trades of veterans after the draft. So again, this draft may end up getting a higher grade still. Now, my third favorite draft is the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos had many holes to fill, and they definitely did not address all of their most important positions to fill in this draft. That's the main reason they did not get an even higher grade than they already did. And let's face it, the third best draft in the class is a very high grade still. I would have loved to have seen them address the left tackle position, because their existing left tackle, whereas he was a first round pick a few years ago, it does not matter. He's a train wreck. He's the weakest position of your offense. And fixing a negative, removing a negative, is exactly as strong of a move as adding a positive. So they did plenty of adding positives. They didn't do any removing negatives. So, but they turned this team into a damn track meet in one draft. They already have Cortland Sutton, who is a fantastic all-around number one wide receiver. He's the kind of guy who he's fast enough to beat most DBs. He's big enough to beat the rest of them. So what you needed were complementary pieces. And they found the perfect complementary pieces. Two, they found their slot route running guy who is going to be able to pick apart defenses by finding open spots in the zone in Jerry Jeudy. And by drafting KJ Hamler, they also found their speed demon that can take the top off a defense and go out on bubble screens and just make magic happen after the catch. So you generally set up wide receiver cores like basketball teams. Everybody has a very specific job to do and a very specific way of attacking the defensive secondary. And when you mesh all of those people together, it creates something fantastic. So those three guys are going to be wreaking havoc together very, very well. And when you add a supremely athletic tight end that your quarterback already has familiarity with because they went to the same college, when you already have a supremely athletic tight end via your first round pick the previous year, there is so much depth of receiving options. You're creating nightmare mismatches. So, do they need to upgrade the protection? Absolutely. Okay? They did address interior offensive line relatively effectively. They did nothing for the left tackle position. I don't think they addressed corner extremely effectively. They did draft some corners, or at least one corner, I want to say. But replacing a Chris Harris Jr. is going to be a very, very, very tall order, and you're not necessarily going to do that with a middle round draft pick. So they could not potentially fill all of their draft needs in one draft. You never can. But what they did address was changing this team with the times of the NFL and giving their quarterback every single opportunity to succeed in his second year. My number 2 draft this year belongs to the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know if Jerry Jones is just getting better at this as years go by, if he has hired some fantastic personnel and scouting minds that he just doesn't tell people about, or if drafting from a mega yacht makes you better at it. I don't know. Combination of those things, maybe. But he got absolute steals. Absolute steals in this draft. And he did it in a way that also provided the over-the-top factor. Very, very similar to my thoughts on Arizona, just 11 times higher. Because they went after CeeDee Lamb in the first round. There was no need to address receiver for this team. They're already a supremely dynamic offense. But addressing receiver makes that offense absolutely freaking nasty and puts it in contention for the best offense in the league. You're now talking Kansas City Chiefs territory when you add CeeDee Lamb to this receiving core with this offensive line, this running back, and quarterback. Is Dak Prescott Pat Mahomes? No. But he's still young and he's still developing. He's still getting better. So is there potential for him to be as good as Pat Mahomes was maybe at the beginning of last year? Sure. Absolutely. He's still growing. And with a much more dynamic receiving core, you can potentially see much more out of Dak Prescott. So you get that over-the-top factor of CeeDee Lamb, which doesn't necessarily address team needs. Your team needs really were edge rush and corner. It mostly because of players that have exited due to you needing to spend money on the offensive side of the ball in order to retain people. So you lose a dynamic corner. Well, what do you know? You got a dynamic corner later on. There's no reason for Trayvon Diggs to drop as far as he did. This is a guy who had serious first-round talent. And unlike other players that you could say, well, he dropped out of the first round because he doesn't necessarily have day one playability. He does have day one playability. He doesn't need to learn techniques he doesn't know. He's been playing in the most pro-ready defense as a playmaking corner for that defense for a long time. He will walk in as your starting corner. And to get him where you did is supreme value. Now, you also pick up Neville Gallimore, who is an absolute monstrosity. A lot of people, myself included, had him as a potential first-round pick. So you get 3 guys that potentially could have gone in the first round with your first 3 picks in different rounds. I don't know what the rest of the league is doing. These guys skipped over as they were, made no sense to me. Jerry Jones just did the smart thing and snapped them up. Kudos. I mean, great freaking job by the Cowboys. Now, that means there's only one team that I felt did a better job. My absolute favorite draft this year was the Baltimore Ravens. They are the only team that I gave an A+ to. And it's because they're on a different level than other teams. They are not drafting to fill needs. They are not drafting to stack a roster and make it just a generally strong NFL roster. They don't really have needs, and it's already one of the strongest rosters in the league. They are drafting to do very, very specific things now. They are drafting to beat the Chiefs. They are drafting to beat the absolute cream of the crop talent in the league, specifically. So they identify one or two things on their roster, one or two things that they're doing that they could be doing a little bit better, a little bit differently, in order to specifically address the things that have been used to attack them by the best teams in the league, or specifically address weaknesses they feel they now can attack when previously they could not. That's why you drafted J.K. Dobbins. The Ravens already have the most dynamic running game in the league, largely because they have the best running quarterback since Michael Vick in Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson can actually throw the damn ball too. But when you add, considering Lamar Jackson has been your speed and dynamic threat to this point, because Mark Ingram is your sledgehammer, now you're adding a different speed and dynamic option in J.K. Dobbins. And you can scheme up plays where all three of them are on the field together. What the hell is a defense going to do? You have two intensely fast players to worry about possibly coming out of the backfield. You've got an absolute wrecking ball that could potentially come out of the backfield. Plus, you have downfield threats and a quarterback that can look like he's running and just chuck it up over the top. So you can't bring your safeties down into the box. You can't just play tight all the time. The things that you do to address an extremely effective running game are predicated on the team not necessarily having an extremely effective passing game as well. Well, Hollywood Brown's only going to get better. So addressing the running back room in the way you did with this roster already constructed is going to be a nightmare for other teams. Now, J.K. Dobbins is my favorite of these picks, but by no means the only solid one. Justin Madubuike is a defensive tackle that I absolutely loved. In many ways, he's extremely, extremely well-rounded. Personally, he's my second favorite defensive tackle in this draft. I liked him over Javon Kinlaw because he may not be as effective a pass rusher, but he is an extremely effective pass rusher, and he's better playing against the run. Not to mention, his effort is more consistently high. He didn't play as many snaps as Kinlaw did, so Kinlaw's taking a break while he's on the field. I get it. But to see that top-level effort very, very consistently, extremely effective against both the run and the pass with decent pass-rushing moves, guy is going to be an immediate upgrade to a defensive front that was not weak. You're adding him to a rotation that you've already added Derek Wolfe and Calais Campbell to. This defensive line is going to be bonkers. It's going to be an immediate answer to what happened with Derrick Henry. Again, specific things you're drafting for. They grabbed Dobbins specifically to address the few defenses that actually are capable of stopping them. Teams like the Buffalo Bills, the New England Patriots. They drafted Madubuike to add to the rotation on defense that they're already addressing in free agency in order to shut down the Derrick Henry issue against the Titans. And they drafted Patrick Queen in the first round to address very specific motion concepts that are being used by the Kansas City Chiefs to attack teams like them. So they're just creating a juggernaut. And as long as Lamar Jackson has any amount of growth over last year in the passing game, they are my odds-on favorite for winning the Super Bowl because of this draft. Tell me what you think. Tell me who your favorite draft teams this year are. Tell me why. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Hit my other videos so you can see specific draft grades and why for every single team. Thanks for watching, guys.